It all started with rejection. Not the dramatic movie-style kind, where you get a heartfelt letter explaining why you're not a good fit. No, this was the modern kind. The soul-crushing silence of a digital void. My name is Andrew, and I'm a pretty damn good graphic designer. My portfolio was sharp, my skills were on point, and I had a decade of experience making brands look slick and professional. But my face, I guess, just didn't sell it. I'm not a bad-looking guy. Just average. Brown hair, brown eyes, a jawline that's more friendly neighbor than industry visionary. Every time I'd send out my resume complete with my professionally shot smiling headshot, I'd get nothing. Or worse, the automated email. Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates. It felt like I was screaming into a hurricane. My talent was there, but nobody seemed to be looking past the packaging. One Tuesday after my 100th rejection, this one from a company whose design aesthetic I could have revolutionized in my sleep, I was just numbly scrolling through some tech blogs. I stumbled upon an article about a new AI avatar generator. It promised photorealistic results, a way to create a digital persona for gaming or social media. I wasn't a gamer, but I was bored and a little bit desperate for a distraction. I clicked the link. The interface was simple. You could tweak everything: face shape, eye color, hairstyle, even the subtle expression. I started messing around, not really thinking about it. I clicked female just for the hell of it and began building a person from scratch. I gave her a strong jaw, but softened it slightly. I chose deep, intelligent-looking hazel eyes and framed them with dark, wavy hair that fell just past her shoulders. I gave her a small, confident smile. Not a big, cheesy grin, but the kind of smirk that said, "I know what I'm doing." She looked powerful, creative, the kind of person who gets things done. I needed a name for the file. I typed in Andrea. It just popped into my head. For a last name, I randomly typed Sterling, probably because I'd seen it on some fancy bottle of gin or something. Andrea Sterling. She looked like an Andrea Sterling. She looked like a winner. For a couple of days, the image just sat on my desktop, a forgotten experiment. I kept applying for jobs as Andrew, and the silence kept screaming back. Then, on a Friday night, after a particularly brutal rejection from a dream job, I was feeling a mix of despair and recklessness. I looked at the avatar of Andrea. A crazy thought born from frustration bubbled up in my mind. What if? It was supposed to be a joke, a social experiment. I just wanted to see if the packaging really mattered that much. I duplicated my portfolio, scrubbed my name from it, and replaced it with hers. I wrote a new cover letter using a slightly different tone, more collaborative, a little less technically blunt than my usual style. I attached Andrea's picture, that confident, captivating face, and sent it off to 10 companies I'd been rejected by before. I closed my laptop and didn't think about it again. Until Monday morning. My inbox, usually a graveyard of automated responses, had 6 new emails. Not rejections. They were from recruiters. Dear Ms. Sterling, your portfolio is incredibly impressive. Andrea, we'd love to schedule a preliminary chat. Hi, Andrea. The team was blown away by your work on the Miller account. My heart started doing this weird, frantic beat against my ribs. It was a joke, but the results were real. Over the next week, Andrea's inbox became a flood of interest. Companies that had ignored Andrew for months were practically begging to talk to Andrea. The difference was so stark, so immediate, it was almost insulting. They loved the exact same work, the same skills, the same history. They just loved it more coming from a woman with a confident smile and hazel eyes. The whole thing was a surreal, out-of-body experience. I was fielding emails for my own imaginary friend. Then came the big one. An offer from a fast-growing international tech startup. The pay was incredible. The projects were exciting. It was a fully remote position, which was the only reason this whole charade had even been possible. The email sat there glowing on my screen. We are so impressed with Andrea Sterling. Your vision and talent are exactly what we've been looking for. Welcome to the team. I stared at the words, my hands trembling slightly. I leaned back in my chair, the cheap pleather groaning in protest. My reflection in the dark monitor was a pale, stunned ghost. My pulse was a drum solo in my ears. The thought that hit me was both terrifying and exhilarating, a jolt of pure, high-voltage absurdity. I just got the job of my dreams, as a virtual woman. The first few weeks were a blur of digital handshakes and Slack notifications. My official title was Senior Designer, and I was working for a company called Innovate, a name as generic as it was ambitious. My team was spread across 3 different time zones, so all communication was text-based. It was the perfect curtain to hide behind. Andrea Sterling existed only as a profile picture, a name in a chat channel, and a series of brilliantly executed design files. And in that space, she thrived. I quickly learned that being Andrea wasn't just about using a different name. It was a performance. I found myself adapting my communication style almost unconsciously at first. Andrew was direct, concise. He'd write, "Here is the revised logo." Feedback, welcome. Andrea was different. She was warmer, more engaging. "Hey team, here's the latest version of the logo concept we discussed." I tried to incorporate everyone's feedback about making it feel more dynamic. Let me know what you think. The emojis were a key part of the costume. A smiley face here, a thumbs up there. It felt silly, almost manipulative, but it worked. People responded to Andrea with an enthusiasm I'd never gotten as Andrew. My ideas were fantastic. My mock-ups were gorgeous. I was praised for being so collaborative and easy to work with. I was the exact same person doing the exact same work, but the perception had completely shifted. My plan, if you could even call it that, was to keep this up for a few weeks, maybe a month, long enough to save up some money, pad my resume with a big-name project, and then have Andrea gracefully resign due to some unforeseen personal issue. It was a temporary solution, a stepping stone. But then something strange happened. I started to enjoy it. The admiration was a drug. As Andrew, I was used to my work being accepted, maybe with a curt nod of approval. As Andrea, my work was celebrated. I'd post a design in the project channel, and within minutes, the reactions would start popping up: fire emojis, clapping hands messages from colleagues telling me I was a rock star. It was intoxicating. For the first time in my professional life, I felt seen. The irony, of course, was that they weren't seeing me at all. This new reality started to bleed into my physical life. I live with a roommate, Mark, a good-natured sales guy who works from home half the time. He was an observer of my strange new habits, though he didn't know the context. He'd see me staring at my screen, smiling at a message, and he'd joke, "Dude, you're way too happy about kerning fonts." I'd just laugh it off. One afternoon, I was deep in Andrea mode, crafting an email to the marketing department. I needed to be persuasive but not pushy. I was trying to channel that confident, approachable energy from her avatar. Mark's girlfriend had left her grey cardigan draped over the back of our sofa. It was made of this incredibly soft-looking merino wool. On a whim, a bizarre impulse I couldn't explain, I stood up and slipped it on. The fabric was light and soft, clinging to my arms and shoulders in a way a man's sweater never would. It didn't feel like a costume. It just felt comfortable. I sat back down at my desk, the wool a soft, warm presence against my skin. And as I typed, I felt a subtle shift. It was easier to find Andrea's voice. The words flowed more smoothly. I felt more in character. It was my first tentative step into a much larger world, and it was strangely, thrillingly pleasant. The feeling was a confusing cocktail of guilt and fascination. I was lying to everyone building my career on a complete fabrication. But tucked inside that soft borrowed cardigan, typing out messages as a woman everyone admired, I also felt a sense of rightness, a bizarre feeling of coming home to a place I'd never known existed. I was just supposed to be playing a part, but I was starting to realize I might be the best actor I knew. The comfortable bubble of my text-only existence was bound to pop. I just didn't expect it to happen so suddenly, or with such terrifying implications. It came in the form of a company-wide email from the CEO herself, Mrs. Evelyn Sterling. The fact that she shared a last name with my fictional persona was a coincidence that had gone from a funny little detail to a source of constant low-grade anxiety. The email was cheerful and corporate. It was all about fostering a more connected remote culture. And then there it was, the sentence that made the blood drain from my face. To kick this off starting next week, all team lead meetings will be moving to video calls. I can't wait to finally see all of your smiling faces. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Video calls, not just audio. Video. They wanted to see Andrea Sterling, the confident hazel-eyed woman from the profile picture. All they would see was me, Andrew, with my 5 o'clock shadow and my decidedly non-female features. Panic set in cold and sharp. This was it. The end of the road. I had 2 options. I could have Andrea quit, effective immediately, citing a sudden vague personal emergency, or I could do the unthinkable. I could try to become her. The first option was the sane one, the rational choice. But the thought of giving it all up, the praise, the exciting work, the feeling of success was physically painful. I had worked my entire life for this kind of opportunity, and I had finally gotten it, albeit through a lie. I couldn't just let it go. And that's when the insane idea started to feel like the only idea. I had to become Andrea for real. My life turned into a crash course in female impersonation. My browser history became a testament to my desperation. I spent hours falling down YouTube rabbit holes, watching makeup tutorials by drag queens and transgender women. I learned about foundation color correction contouring and the magic of a good primer. I learned the difference between a pencil skirt and an A-line skirt, between a blouse and a shell top. I was a student in a school I never knew existed, cramming for the most important final exam of my life. The next step was shopping. I couldn't risk going to a store, so my credit card got a serious workout online. A long wavy brown wig that matched Andrea's avatar. A couple of simple professional-looking blouses in silk-like polyester. A black pencil skirt. A pair of sensible low-heeled pumps. The most difficult purchase was the bra. I stared at the sizing charts, completely lost. I ended up ordering a few different sizes along with a set of silicone breast forms or pads, as the website delicately called them. The box arrived a few days later, a plain brown cardboard tomb containing my terrifying new identity. The night before the first video call, I locked my bedroom door. Mark was out with friends, so I had the apartment to myself. It was time for a dress rehearsal. I laid everything out on my bed, like a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. First came the shave. I'd never shaved so meticulously in my life, going over my face again and again until my skin was raw and screaming. Then the makeup. I followed a tutorial, pausing the video every 10 seconds. The foundation felt thick and pasty, like I was spackling a wall. I struggled with the eyeliner, smudging it twice before getting a semi-straight line. I applied a neutral shade of lipstick, and the waxy, slightly floral smell was completely alien. Then came the body. I put on the bra, its straps feeling tight and strange against my shoulders. I unwrapped the silicone pads. They were cool to the touch, heavy and weirdly lifelike. Sliding them into the bra cups was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. The feeling of that weight against my chest was immediate and profound. It changed my posture, my center of gravity. It was a constant physical reminder that I was not myself. I slipped on the blouse and tucked it into the pencil skirt. The fabric was smooth, but the skirt was constricting. I wasn't used to my movements being so limited. Finally, the wig. I put on a wig cap, pulling my own short hair flat, and then carefully settled the mass of brown curls on my head. It felt itchy and hot. The last step was the shoes. I slid my feet into the low heels. The slight elevation tilted my whole body forward. I stood up, wobbling for a moment, and took a few clunky steps across my small bedroom. The sound of the heels, a sharp clack, 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 on the hardwood floor echoed in the quiet room. It was the sound of a woman. With my heart in my throat, I turned to face the full-length mirror on my closet door. And I saw her. It wasn't me anymore. The thick makeup had hidden my beard shadow. The contouring had softened my jaw. The wig framed a face that was unnervingly convincing. She was a stranger, this woman in the mirror, but she was also undeniably Andrea. She looked both glamorous and completely out of place in my cluttered bedroom. She was a paradox of confidence and fear. The next morning, I went through the entire ritual again, my hands shaking so badly I could barely apply the lipstick. I sat at my desk, my knee bouncing nervously under the skirt. The notification popped up, video meeting starting now. I took a deep, shuddering breath, smoothed down my blouse, and clicked join. My own face, Andrea's face, appeared in the corner of the screen. It was jarring. The call filled with the faces of my colleagues, all smiling and waving. Then Evelyn Sterling appeared. She was poised, elegant, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. "Wonderful to see you all," she said, her voice warm but commanding. She went around the virtual room, greeting everyone. My turn came. "And Andrea, it's so lovely to finally put a face to the name." "Welcome." I managed a small, tight smile. I tried to pitch my voice a little higher, a little softer. "It's great to be here, Mrs. Sterling," I squeaked out. My throat was so dry. The meeting went on for an hour. I said as little as possible, just nodding and smiling, trying to look engaged and professional. Every second felt like an eternity. I was convinced they could see through the pixels, that they could tell my wig was slightly crooked, that my voice was a fraud. But they didn't. When the meeting was over, just before everyone logged off, Mrs. Sterling smiled directly at me. "Andrea, you've been a fantastic addition to this team. So professional. I'm very glad to have you with us." The call ended. The screen went blank. I just sat there, frozen, listening to the frantic pounding of my own heart. Then a wave of relief so powerful, it felt like a physical blow washed over me, and I nearly slumped out of my chair. The strange weight on my chest, a heavy reminder of the impossible thing I had just done. I had survived. Andrea was real. That first successful video call wasn't the end of the terror. It was the beginning of a new high-stakes routine. The team lead meeting became a weekly event, and soon other project meetings started shifting to video as well. Getting into character, as Andrea was no longer a one-time emergency measure. It became a part of my work week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays were Andrea days. On those mornings, my alarm went off an hour earlier. The ritual of transformation became second nature, but no less surreal. Shave, conceal, foundation, contour, eyes, lips. The feel of the makeup brush on my skin became as familiar as the feel of a keyboard under my fingertips. I'd slip into her clothes, the soft blouses and structured skirts, and the day would begin. A strange thing started to happen. I began to look forward to it. There was a thrill, a rush of adrenaline in pulling off the deception. But it was more than that. I was starting to genuinely enjoy being Andrea. In her clothes, with her face, I felt a different kind of confidence. When I spoke in meetings, my ideas seemed to carry more weight. When I presented a design, people listened with a different kind of respect. Andrew was the quiet, competent guy in the background. Andrea was a presence. I set aside a section of my closet just for her. It started with the 2 blouses and the 1 skirt. Then I bought a few more things. A stylish blazer, a couple of cashmere blend sweaters, a pair of more comfortable but still professional block heels. I found myself browsing women's clothing websites in the evenings, not as research, but because I genuinely liked the styles. I would sit for hours some nights, just trying on different combinations, seeing how they looked, how they felt. It was a secret world confined to my bedroom, a world where I could be someone else. Someone better, it seemed. This dual existence created a deep churning conflict inside me. On one hand, I was consumed with guilt. My entire career was a lie. Every compliment I received felt fraudulent, every success tainted. I lived in constant gnawing fear of being discovered. A slip of the tongue, a technical glitch on a video call, Mark walking in at the wrong moment, any of it could bring my carefully constructed world crashing down. But the other side of the coin was a powerful, undeniable sense of validation. The admiration directed at Andrea felt good. It was what Andrew had always wanted. I was addicted to the feeling of being seen, even if the person they were seeing wasn't really me. Or was she? The line was getting blurry. The complication I hadn't anticipated was Lucas. He was a project manager on my team, a smart, funny guy based in the Chicago office. From our first text-based interactions, he'd been friendly and complimentary of my work. But after the video calls started, something shifted. He began sending me private messages on Slack. It started innocently. "Great presentation today, Andrea. You really know your stuff." I'd reply with a professional thank you, maybe a smiley emoji. Then the messages became more personal. He'd ask about my weekend. He'd send a funny meme he thought I'd like. One afternoon after a particularly long meeting, a message popped up from him. "You have a really cute smile when you're concentrating, you know that." I froze. I was sitting at my desk fully dressed as Andrea, makeup and all. I read the message again. My face, my actual physical face, flushed red. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck. I instinctively touched my lips, my fingers coming away with a faint smudge of the nude lipstick I was wearing. My heart was doing a weird little flutter. It was a completely foreign feeling. As Andrew, I'd never been flirted with like this. It was confusing and embarrassing, but underneath it all, there was a tiny, thrilling spark. I didn't know what to do with it. I typed out a simple deflective response, "Haha, thanks. Just trying to make sure the pixel alignment is perfect." He replied almost instantly, "See, that's why you're the best." I leaned back in my chair, my head spinning. Lucas was flirting with Andrea, and Andrew, the man under the wig and the makeup, was blushing. I didn't know who was feeling what anymore. Was I flattered? Was I just enjoying the validation of being found attractive? Or was some part of me the part that was becoming? Andrea genuinely enjoying the attention. I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor. Andrea looked back, her expression unreadable. The two lives I was living were beginning to merge, and the person caught in the middle was getting lost. Andrea's star just kept rising. Her design work was consistently excellent, and her performance in meetings was always professional and insightful. I had become one of the most respected creatives at the company. The praise was constant, the projects were getting bigger, and my confidence, at least as Andrea, was soaring. I had successfully compartmentalized my life. There was Andrew, the guy who paid the rent and took out the trash, and there was Andrea, the brilliant designer who was taking the tech world by storm. The peak of this surreal journey came during a one-on-one video call with Evelyn Sterling. She started with the usual praise for my recent work on a major product launch. Then she paused, her expression turning more serious. "Andrea," she said, her gaze steady even through the screen. "I've been talking with the board. We've been so impressed with your leadership and your vision. We'd like to offer you the position of head of design." I felt the air leave my lungs. Head of design. It was a director-level role, a massive salary increase, a chance to build and lead my own team. It was the kind of job I had only dreamed of, the pinnacle of a career. For a moment, I was just pure ecstatic joy, and then the cold, hard reality crashed down on me. The role will, of course, come with new responsibilities. Evelyn continued oblivious to the silent implosion happening on my end of the call, one of which will be representing Innovate at industry events. In fact, your first official duty would be to attend the Innovate Future Conference in Singapore next month. It's a huge opportunity for us, and I want you to be the face of our design team. Singapore, a conference, in person. My blood ran cold. The words stuck in my throat. I couldn't do a weekly video call without my nerves shredding. How could I possibly survive an international business trip? The logistics were a nightmare. Airports, hotel check-ins, networking events, dinners. There would be no hiding behind a carefully lit screen. I'd have to be Andrea for days on end under the bright, unforgiving lights of a convention center. It was impossible. The whole thing would fall apart. I scrambled for an excuse, my mind racing. I feigned a flustered, grateful surprise. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm speechless. That's an incredible offer." "Thank you." I took a breath. "The conference. I'd love to, but I have some personal family matters I'm dealing with right now. I'm not sure I can travel internationally on such short notice." Evelyn's smile tightened just a fraction, a barely perceptible shift. "I see. Well, that's a shame. This would be a very important trip. Think about it, Andrea. The offer stands." The pressure mounted. Evelyn would bring up the Singapore trip in our weekly calls, and I would keep making vague, evasive excuses. I could feel her patience wearing thin. A seed of suspicion was being planted. I was the star employee who never left her house, the team leader who was afraid to meet her team. It didn't add up. The strain of maintaining the facade was becoming unbearable. It was no longer just about the hour of prep for video calls. I became obsessed with perfection, terrified that one small mistake would give me away. I practiced my Andrea voice constantly, trying to raise its pitch and soften its cadence until my throat was raw and hoarse. I'd walk around my apartment in heels for hours, trying to master a graceful walk instead of my usual clomping until my feet were covered in painful blisters. The physical toll was immense. The heavy foundation worn for 8 hours a day, 3 days a week, was making my skin break out. My back ached from the unfamiliar posture forced on me by the bra and heels. I was in a constant state of exhaustion, not just from the work, but from the performance. I was living on a knife's edge, and the drop was getting steeper every day. Andrew was disappearing, consumed by the effort of keeping Andrea alive. And Andrea, the brilliant creation who had gotten me everything I ever wanted, was now the architect of my own personal hell. The promotion was a golden key to a door I could never walk through, and the conference in Singapore wasn't an opportunity. It was a guillotine. As the date for the Singapore conference loomed, my carefully constructed world began to fracture. The pressure from Evelyn was subtle, but relentless. My excuses were wearing thin, and I could feel the invisible thread of her trust beginning to fray. I wasn't sleeping. I was anxious all the time, jumping at every email notification, my stomach in a permanent knot. The lie had become a prison, and I was rattling the bars. I reached my breaking point on a Tuesday night, less than 2 weeks before the conference. I was sitting in my room, surrounded by Andrea's clothes, the tools of my deception laid out before me. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, my own tired face, Andrew's face, and I felt a wave of despair so profound it almost buckled my knees. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't go to Singapore. I couldn't keep up the act at this intensity. It was going to destroy me. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, I composed an email to Evelyn. I dressed it up in corporate language, citing a sudden and serious family health emergency that required my immediate and full attention, making international travel impossible for the foreseeable future. I formally, and with deep regret, turned down the head of design position, but expressed my fervent desire to continue in my current role. I hit send before I could lose my nerve, feeling a sense of both catastrophic failure and profound relief. Evelyn's reply was prompt and professional. She expressed her sympathies for my situation and assured me that my current role was secure, but the warmth was gone. The conference came and went. I saw the pictures on the company's internal social feed, Evelyn and other team members, smiling, networking, standing on a brightly lit stage. A space where Andrea should have been. A week after the team returned from Singapore, I received a calendar invitation from Evelyn. The subject was simple catch-up. It was a one-on-one video call scheduled for the following afternoon. There were no other attendees. My blood turned to ice. This was it. This was the interrogation. I spent the next 24 hours in a state of controlled panic. The morning of the call, I went through the Andrea ritual with a grim sense of finality. This could be the last time I ever did this. I put on a conservative navy blue blouse, applied my makeup with meticulous care, and sat at my desk, my back ramrod straight, waiting for the meeting to begin. When I clicked the link, Evelyn was already there. She wasn't at her desk. She was in what looked like a comfortable armchair in her home office, a cup of tea steaming beside her. She looked relaxed, which only made me more nervous. "Andrea." She began, her voice soft, devoid of any corporate formality. "Thank you for meeting with me. How are things with your family?" "They're complicated, but we're managing. Thank you for asking." I lied, my voice sounding thin and weak even to my own ears. She nodded slowly, taking a sip of her tea. She looked at me, her eyes sharp and intelligent, and for a long moment she said nothing. The silence was deafening. I felt like an insect under a microscope. Finally she spoke, and her words were not at all what I had expected. "I'm not going to ask you about your family, Andrea. And I'm not going to ask you why you turned down a promotion you more than earned, or why you've never been able to meet any of us in person. I have my suspicions, of course. But your secret, whatever it is your own." I was so stunned I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, my heart hammering against my ribs. She continued, her tone even and measured. It wasn't angry or accusatory. It was knowing. "You are without a doubt one of the most talented designers I have ever worked with. Your contributions to this company are invaluable. But your work and your persona exist behind a wall. I don't know what's behind that wall, and I sense that you can't or won't ever let it down." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not going to fire you. Your talent is too great to lose. But I can't promote you to a leadership position under these circumstances. Leadership requires presence, transparency. It requires a level of trust that we unfortunately don't have. So here's the reality. You can continue in your current role, working remotely, for as long as you like. You will be respected. You will be well compensated. But you will not advance further. I don't know what your secret is. I don't need to know. But you need to understand, if you choose to live behind this wall, you will have to live with the ceiling it creates." I was completely speechless. She knew. She didn't know the specifics, but she knew the whole thing was a performance. She wasn't outing me. She wasn't punishing me. She was giving me a choice, laying out the terms of my gilded cage with a calm, brutal honesty. I found my voice a choked whisper. "I understand." "Good," she said, her professional demeanor returning. "I'm glad we had this chat." She ended the call. I sat there in my full Andrea costume, the silence of my apartment rushing back in. I hadn't been exposed, but I had been seen. Evelyn Sterling hadn't torn down my wall, but she had shown me that she knew exactly where its foundations were, and she had just locked the gate. Life after my conversation with Evelyn settled into a strange new rhythm. The acute heart-stopping panic was gone, replaced by a dull, chronic ache of acceptance. I had a deal, an unspoken truce. I would deliver brilliant work as Andrea Sterling, the talented but enigmatic remote designer, and in return the company would ask no questions. The ceiling Evelyn had described was real and solid. I could see the executive level, the leadership roles, the exciting opportunities, but I could never reach them. I was safe, but I was also stuck. My days were a study in contrasts. From 9 to 5, I was Andrea. I'd put on the makeup, the wig, the carefully chosen outfit, and immerse myself in my work. In that world, I was confident, articulate, and celebrated. I led design sprints, presented to clients, and mentored junior designers, all through the safety of my screen. I was a star in a digital universe of my own making. The praise felt good, the work was fulfilling, and for hours at a time I could almost forget the man underneath it all. But then, at the end of the day, the performance would end. I'd peel off the wig, the scratchy lace, leaving a red mark on my forehead. I'd wipe away the makeup, revealing Andrew's tired, pale face beneath. I'd take off the blouse and skirt and put on an old t-shirt and jeans. And in that quiet moment, looking at the smear of lipstick on a cotton pad, a profound sense of emptiness would wash over me. I was living in a state of perpetual limbo. I wasn't fully Andrew anymore, but I could never truly be Andrea. Banishing the ghost of my former professional self was easy. He was a failure, a nobody. But banishing Andrew the man, that was another story. At night, I would look in the mirror sometimes with traces of mascara still smudged under my eyes, and I'd feel a deep, unsettling disconnect. I was successful, but I was a fraud. I was admired, but I was invisible. I was both the star of the show and the lonely man behind the curtain, and the two were becoming harder and harder to separate. Lucas continued to be a constant confusing presence in my life. His flirtatious Slack messages didn't stop. If anything, they became more frequent. He would compliment Andrea's ideas in a meeting, then send a private message saying, "You're so smart." It's kind of intimidating. And kind of amazing. He was still charming, still funny, and my reaction to his messages was still a tangled mess of emotions. The blush that crept up my neck was real. The flutter in my stomach was real. I found myself looking forward to his messages, smiling at my screen like a teenager with a crush. But who was he crushing on a carefully constructed fiction? And who was I, the person smiling back? Was it Andrew amused by the absurdity of it all? Or was it Andrea genuinely enjoying the attention of a handsome, witty man? The question echoed in the lonely space of my apartment. Has this all been an act, or has it been a discovery? Did I create Andrea, or did I just finally let her out? One evening, after a particularly long day of back-to-back video calls, I was sitting in front of my mirror, slowly taking off my makeup. The wig was already on its stand, a silent, headless effigy. I had wiped off the foundation from one side of my face, but not the other. In the glass, I saw a person split in two. On the left was Andrew, with his tired eyes and emerging stubble. On the right was Andrea. Her eye perfectly lined her cheek, contoured her lips, still holding a hint of color. It was a bizarre, fractured reflection of my life. I stared at that divided face at the seam running right down the middle of my identity. Lucas had sent a message just before I logged off. "Hope you have a great night, Andrea. Been thinking about you." I had felt that familiar, confusing warmth spread through my chest. I looked from the made-up eye to the bare one. The person looking back wasn't just Andrew playing a part, nor was it a complete fiction. It was something new, something in between. The line had been blurred for so long that it had all but disappeared. Andrea's confidence had become my confidence. Her voice was becoming my voice. Her feelings, it seemed, were becoming my feelings. The reflection in the mirror held my gaze, its expression a mystery I couldn't solve. Was this a prison or a liberation? I leaned in closer, the scent of makeup remover and lipstick filling the air. In the quiet of the room, I heard myself whisper to the divided face in the mirror, a question that felt like a confession. Maybe I have become her.